Okay. Let's make a start. Stop being so friendly, please. We don't want any of that here. Let's make a start. Well, a really warm welcome to you. My name's Tom. If you haven't met me, I would love to do that. A lot of you have been away for spring break. We went up to a place that by all rights should be called Buena Vista, but we understand it's Buena Vista for some reason here in Colorado, so that's okay. But we got back on Thursday. We had a fun little trip to a remote Airbnb. So I hope you had a good week. If you've been away, we are continuing our series in the Gospel of John, famous last words. And so I want to start with a question this morning, which is this: have you ever known someone that thought they were in charge even though they weren't? Now is not the time to look at your spouse. Maybe you played team sports growing up and there was that one player that would just be shouting at everyone, telling them what to do. Maybe at your place of work, there's that one person that loves to tell you how to do your job. Or maybe you had an older sibling growing up, and that's just an older sibling's right. I think one of the best examples of this is toddlers. Toddlers, they literally can do nothing. They can do nothing. They can't get dressed. They can't feed themselves. They can barely go to the bathroom. Yet, they hold this incredible self-assurance that they are fully and 100% in charge. I have two girls who are 9 and 5, so they're mostly out of that, although they seem to easily slip back into that at any point. So we've had that experience, and when I was thinking about this, I remembered a moment where I was collecting my eldest from school. So this is a few years ago, and I was holding my youngest. She was about 2 at the time, and there was a granddad who would do the school run, and he took a liking for my youngest, Ellie. So he would come over. He was really old, so he wouldn't walk over. He would kind of just shuffle over slowly, and and he would lean in, and he would do all the things that grandparents do, saying how sweet she was and how lovely her smile is, and I've stood there and feeling like a proud parent, and seeing intergenerational connection. And then my daughter just leans in, looks at him, and just goes, "You have no teeth." So it brought that lovely moment to a quick end. So toddlers, they'll say whatever they want, they'll do whatever they want. And so the reason why I start with this is that we are looking at the final words that Jesus shared with his followers, with his closest disciples. And Jesus is one of the most well-known people in history, one of the most quoted people in history. But the main problem that people at the time of Jesus and since have had with him is that he did the very thing that I was just talking about. He spent his life walking around telling people that he actually was in charge. The thing is, he did it in a way that people often didn't understand. He spent his life making outrageous claims about who he was. He told people that he was living water that would quench their thirst forever. He said he was the bread of life that would satisfy their hunger. He said he was the light of the world. He said he was the Son of God. Last week we heard him talk about the fact that he was the way, the truth, and the life. And so when we make our way through this upper room discourse, as it's sometimes called, we need to pay close attention to what Jesus is saying. Because based off the claims he made about himself, C.S. Lewis famously said that he either was mad or actually he was exactly what he said he was. And so we're going to turn to John 15 today, and I'm going to read it to us. Because again, Jesus, he wasn't letting up in the claims that he was making about himself. So John 15, Jesus says this: "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my word abides in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. But by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. That's God's word to us. So if you were a first century Jew, like Jesus' followers were, and you heard that him saying these words about being the true vine, you would have had mixed emotions. And it's always important for us to think about the context of when the scriptures were written and then were heard. So on one hand, they would have been very familiar with this imagery of a vine. Grapevines were a familiar sight in first century Palestine. And the Old Testament, which was their scriptures, was full of this imagery. Psalm 80 talks about how it says this: you bought a vine out of Egypt, you drove out the nations and you planted it. You would have heard the words of the Hebrew prophets speaking of and likening Israel, the people of God, to a vineyard. However, just because they were familiar with this imagery, this would still have caused them quite a lot of confusion. Firstly, because in the scriptures, vineyards and the vine was always linked to the people of God as a whole. So the nation of Israel was always likened to a vineyard. And suddenly Jesus is standing up and saying, I am the vineyard. So he's located it now into him personally. And secondly, it would have been confusing because nearly always in the Old Testament, the imagery of a vineyard was linked to the incoming judgment of God on the disobedience of the people. It wouldn't have brought good images into their heads. So, for example, in Isaiah 5, it talks about a vineyard that's planted and cared for with love, but instead of growing good grapes, it grows wild, inedible grapes. And so they would have had these things in the back of their mind, good Jewish boys, they would have known the scriptures. Jesus stands up and says, I am the true vine. And what he's doing is this: he's saying, he's making the contrast between what has gone before and now what will come through him. He's making that contrast, and it's quite an incendiary contrast. In fact, it was these kind of contrasts that ended up getting him killed. But he's saying, no longer is the path to God through the nation of Israel. The path to God is through me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. I am the true people of God. I am the true humanity. I am the new Adam. I am the way that you can now access the Father. I will provide you with that life-giving connection to the vine dresser. He's basically saying this: you guys were supposed to be the vine that God planted into the world to transform it. That's what you were supposed to be. He cared for you. He led you out of Egypt. He established you in the land. And yet again and again, due to our fallen nature, disobedience led them astray. And so he was saying this: I have come to do the very thing that you were unable to do. And I will be who you were unable to be. And right at the start, it's so important for us to pause before we dive deeper into this passage and recognize that what Jesus is doing is declaring the gospel of good news. He's saying, I'm going to enter into your mess, and I will transform that mess and make it good through my life and my death and resurrection. He's saying, you have been a fruitless vine, but I am the true vine. And again, it's so important for us to remember that that is the historical context, but the same is true for us. We are just as broken and lost as the people he was speaking to were then. And so Jesus, the true vine, comes to us and says, I have made a way for you to be grafted into the family of God. And we're going to swing back to this later, but already I want you to be thinking about this question in your head: what vine am I drawing my life from? Am I grafted into Jesus? Or maybe do I find myself today where actually I'm starting to find my life, or attempting, from other sources: power and success, relationships, substances, whatever it may be. Have that thought in your mind. Where am I finding my life from? Jesus stands up and says, I am the true vine. And so this morning we want to think about, well, how can we be connected to the vine? Jesus talked about this. This is such a rich passage. We could probably do weeks and weeks on it. But as any good preacher, I wanted to make just 2 points to you this morning. 2 things that we can think about that Jesus says are the marks of a true disciple. The marks of a true disciple, and they are simply this: disciples are fruitful and they're joyful. Disciples are fruitful and joyful. So first, being fruitful. What does that look like? How can we be fruitful followers of Christ? What this chapter tells us is that true disciples of Jesus have a permanent, life-giving, fruit-producing union with Jesus. Disciples bear fruit. It's part of their nature. It's part of their regeneration into life in Christ. And this chapter breaks down into two parts. The first part is this illustration of the vine. Again, that simple point that being united with Jesus will bring life to us. And then the second part moves into what that fruit looks like: obedience, prayer, love, joy, sacrificial love. This is the seventh and the final I am statement that Jesus makes in the Gospel of John. And he's saying the only way for you to bear real kingdom fruit is to be connected to me. And this is the bit that we will find, you'll see, can be difficult. Not only is he the only way for us to bear fruit, God will do anything he needs to do to help us do that. The scripture, the passage talks to us about what happens to those branches that don't bear fruit. And the lesson for us is this, is that God will do whatever is necessary for you to bear fruit when you say yes to life with him. Now, on the face of it, that sounds great. I want to be fruitful. I want to be rich, and I want to be popular. That's the kind of fruitful I like the idea of. You know, my kids will be really obedient, and, you know, the sick will just be healed as I walk past in my shadow. And that kind of fruitfulness, I think I'm down with that. You know, make me fruitful, Lord, if that's what fruitful means. And aren't we all experts at just putting in our own little interpretation of what things mean in Scripture? I want to be fruitful. I also want to define to God what fruitful means. The problem is that to understand this chapter and this analogy, we have to also understand gardening. Hands up if you have green fingers. Do you like to garden? No. What a dreadful bunch of people you are. It's all right. Who cares about that? Who cares about fresh produce? But that's a joke. But my wife and I, Hannah, we actually quite enjoy it. And so over the years, we've tried to do our best, you know, with mixed success, to grow things. We bought our first house when we hadn't been married very long. It cost us £99,000, our first house. That just makes me kind of sick and angry that we now live in this expensive part of the world. But and we had to gut the whole house. It was a complete mess. I think the old couple had died or whatever. You know, it was in a bit of a sorry state. But we did it up, and the garden was a mess. Like, the grass was up to my head, and everything was overgrown. And so I remember the first day, you know, the first mow of the lawn. It's like a jungle. I actually remember I was mowing the lawn, and I stepped on something. I looked down, and I kind of pulled away. And for a split second, I thought I'd found a pile of bones. And so I thought, okay, well, that's where the old couple ended up. They actually were just rocks that really looked like bones. That was disconcerting. And then we're cutting everything back, and then there were these everything was tied up with this weird stretchy material, and we realized it was the old lady's old pair of tights that she tied up all the garden with. And then I thought, oh, and these are dead ladies' tights as well, which made it even weirder. So that garden took a lot of love and care to get it right, but we made it. You know, we had a lot of time, and I built veg boxes, and we planted things. And then the second house we ended up buying, it was kind of the opposite. It was just 100% new grass. That was it. And so it was kind of the opposite work. We had to dig borders in, again, build veg boxes. We planted apple trees and raspberries and blueberries and all that kind of stuff. But if there's one lesson we learned in all of this, even when it came to flowers and roses, is that what was consistent is that every year we had to cut our garden back. We had to cut our garden back. And it feels counterintuitive often. You're like, hang on, is it going to come back? And I actually like this thing. But for our garden to be most productive, most fruitful, most beautiful with the flowers, every year we had to prune it. And frankly, this is one of the hardest truths that we have to wrestle with as followers of Christ, is that in the same way a gardener cuts back a garden, God will cut us back and prune us back in our lives. And the reason is this: it's not because he's mad or angry or just vindictive. It's because he's fully committed to you bearing fruit in your life. He's fully committed, and he's not willing to let you stay on the vine and not bear fruit. Jesus' words, again, I am the true vine, my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. Honestly, it's a sobering statement to read. It should cause us to pause. The branches that don't bear fruit are taken away, And even the ones that do will be pruned so they may bear more. God is determined to shape you and me into something better than what we already are. He's 100% committed to making you more like Jesus. And due to our fallen condition and our sin and our brokenness, essentially the way he will do that is through pruning and cutting us back. And quite frankly, in my own life, I can tell you this: the ways the Lord has shaped me most nearly always are in times of suffering. Those desert periods of my life. I look back now, and I'm sure a lot of you will be able to say the same. It's suffering, it's being cut back, that really forms us into the person of Jesus. And the reason is, that's his life story as well. And the problem is, like we talked about, by nature, we don't really want to be pruned. Particularly in the West, we have a real deep aversion to suffering. You know, we want to wake up and have our single origin coffee and go to work, and if I order something, I want it the next day. In fact, what I want is that 4 to 8 p.m. window, but they want to charge me $3 more, so then I'm debating, is it worth the $3? But we build our lives so much on comfort. We build our lives to work around us. You know, we put up big fences and gates to keep the people that we don't like out, and all of our life is focused so much on comfort. The truth is this, though, and it's kind of disconcerting. God's commitment to your fruit bearing is far greater than your own commitment to comfort. I'll say that again. God's commitment to your fruit bearing far outweighs your own commitment to comfort. God will do whatever it takes to make us into a people that bear kingdom fruit and proclaim the gospel throughout the world. Like I said, we like to name the fruit and tell God, that's what we want to do. I'm sure we've all prayed prayers where we're like, God, I just want you to bless what I'm doing now. You know, this is the business I run. This is my life. Just bless that, and we'll kind of come to this agreement. The problem is that if we want to be connected to the vine, that is not what Jesus is telling us will happen. He will do whatever it takes for us to bear fruit of his kingdom. Because a branch is only alive if the sap flows through the trunk. And the sap can only flow through the trunk if it's connected to the vine. Jesus says again and again in this passage, abide in me. Abide in me. That is how the life-giving power, the sap, the freedom, the forgiveness, the joy, the peace, the patience, that is how it will flow through you and your life. I bet you there's some of you here today, and that idea that you could live a peaceful life, free from anxiety, free from worry, couldn't feel further away. But the truth is that abiding in Jesus, that is a reality we can experience. We can experience freedom in him. True disciples bear fruit. If Jesus takes up residence in you, you will be different. Maybe you're here this morning and you haven't invited Jesus to do just that, to take up residence in you. And maybe this morning is your opportunity to do that. Say, God, I've tried to do things on my own. I've tried to be my own person, to produce my own fruit. And I've come to the end of myself. And I want to be grafted in and connected to you. We did a whole sermon series last year in the autumn on what the fruit of being connected to Jesus looks like. It's called the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I don't know about you, but I need a lot more of all of that in my life. And doesn't society around us need a lot more of that as well? These are the marks of a true follower of Jesus when we are connected to him. Because I want to say this, is that if you're here and you don't yet know Christ and you're kind of weighing this up, I want to say this, is that the pruning and the cutting back comes for all of us. It's not a case where you're living like a fairy tale life and everything's perfect, and then you say yes to Christ and suddenly all the bad things start happening. I mean, gosh, it's pretty much 5 years to the day that in the UK we went into lockdown. We had about 3 days to work out how to live stream in the church I worked for. So I was flicking back to old photos. I was literally in like a side room in our house with a laptop open. Gosh, wasn't the pandemic a time of cutting back and pruning for all of us? No one escaped that. Follower of Christ or not, life is hard. We all get cut back. We all get pruned. Essentially, that knife comes for everyone. Sin has given their life to Christ. The same knife that comes to cut you back actually will make you into someone more like Jesus if you've given your life to him. It makes no sense. It doesn't seem logical. But again, the reason we believe that is because the scriptures show us that that was Jesus' own experience. He modeled to us a life of sacrifice, a life of serving, and ultimately, he gave his life away for all of us. The knife came for him. So we cannot live our lives expecting it not to come for us. But when we do it with him, it can produce the most beautiful and wonderful fruit because of it. Tim Keller, the great pastor and author who's passed away, he put it like this: Jesus was cut off from the Father so that you and I would only have to be cut back. Jesus was cut off so we might only be cut back and be grafted into him forever. So being fruitful. And secondly, this passage tells us that followers of Jesus will be joyful. Joy is an unmistakable mark of a follower of Jesus. Jesus said this in this passage: if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. Jesus created all things, which means he created joy itself. And he's saying, if you are connected to me, my joy will be inside of you. He promises us his joy will flow through us in the same way, like we talked about, the sap flows through branches. It's not a transaction. He doesn't deliver it to us via FedEx. It is a response and a reality of people that know and love him. Joy is a relationship. It's a relationship that we experience. And we don't just feel it, we're engulfed by it. It's above us and below us and all around us. The joy of knowing salvation in Christ. And what's interesting to me is that these verses about joy follow the verses about obedience. And again, if you're a parent like me, rarely do my children seem joyful when I make them be obedient to me. Rarely do I experience that, yes, Dad, we will do exactly what you say. No, it normally involves a threat of going to the door or time out in the room or something. So we can build up this picture in our mind that obedience and joy are two opposite things. That being obedient to God, we just have to grit our teeth. And the scriptures don't tell us that. They tell us that obedience to Christ can produce a deep joy in our hearts. Joy comes through obedience. And as I was preparing for this morning, I had a sense that there may be some of you here today that you've stumbled into a place where joy feels a long way away. And in fact, the opposite of that. If you're really honest with yourself, you just find yourself feeling mad all the time and angry. You wake up and you feel mad with your spouse or your kids or the news, with your job, with things you have had to burden or things you've lost. You come to church and you feel mad with the song choices and the strange British people that do the sermon. And if you're really, right now, maybe there's even a part of you that's getting annoyed about the fact that I'm even talking about that you may be feeling angry. But that can happen to us. When life doesn't go the way we want, this thing can start to churn us up. I also had a sense that maybe there's folks here, it's not mad and anger, it's actually sadness. That maybe you've entered into a time of grief, which is very natural. We all have that. But again, it became elongated and stretched. And what that grief became was a defining feature of who you are. It's like a cloud that you just live in, just sadness and grief. Whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, Jesus says, be connected to me and you will be full of my joy. That is a reality we can live in. And we would love to pray with you today when we move into response. The joy and wonder of being a branch connected to Christ. It's the promise of Jesus to us in every season. We will bear fruit. We will be pruned. We will have good seasons and bad seasons. We will be cut back and we will grow. And in all of it, in whatever season you find yourself in now, the joy of the Lord can be your strength. Perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus, for the joy set before him, endured the cross. I don't think joy and crucifixion are two things that we would naturally put together in the same sentence. But if you want a microcosm, if you want just a really zoomed in picture of what the gospel of Jesus is, it's lose your life so you can gain it. Give up what is important to you to gain something far greater. Sell all you have and buy the pearl of great price. Jesus endured the cross for the joy set before him, and you can endure and what God has placed on you to grow you into someone like Jesus, and the joy of the Lord can be your experience. Abide in me, and you will be fruitful and joyful in whatever season you find yourself. That is the promise of Christ to us. We're going to come into land soon, but as I was thinking about this morning, I was reminded of a picture, an analogy that C.S. Lewis includes in his book, Mere Christianity. I was thinking about that first house that we bought that needed so much work, and then you pull something down and you find something else, and it just kind of spirals out of control. And so often we just pause and we're like, I didn't expect my life to look like this. Isn't that easy to do? We're busy and things happen, and suddenly you pause and you're like, I never thought this would be my reality. I never thought I would have experienced those hard things. I never thought I would find myself in patterns of this behavior. And we can lose sight of the work of Christ in our lives. And it's so easy to confuse the pruning and the cutting back as just an attack from the enemy, when instead it could be the work of the Lord in your life to grow you into someone more like Jesus. So C.S. Lewis wrote this. He said, imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you can understand what he's doing. He's getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that these jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace, and he intends to come and live in it himself. That is the work of Christ in your life, to make you into something that bears his fruit, a palace where he can dwell inside of you. So why don't we stand? We're going to respond. I'd love the worship team to come up.